Hi there. I'm William Bullock, and tonight I'm with Mark Roberts. We're both photographers. We've been taking photographs of concerts, gigs, performances um, at various time zones. Most of my stuff's from a long time ago. Mark's much more contemporary than me, and we thought we'd have a bit of a discussion about photography in concert conditions, favourite photographs we've taken, things like that. So, Mark, thanks for coming along and welcome. And
Thank you.
it's all right. So, I thought that I didn't know really where to start. I guess I'd like to ask you how you got into photography in general terms, and then more specifically, how you got into, I don't know, I call it gig photography. I don't know what you call it,
Gig or concert
underground
photography.
madness.
Yeah,
Yeah,
lurking in the shadows.
yes, indeed.
Yes,
It is
I
that.
started out. So my mum was an avid photographer. She went to uni doing photography. That all
Mm.
stopped because of me and my brothers and sisters. But that sort of creative outlet came from my mum. When I was growing up, I was never as good a surfer or skater as my mates, so I used to always grab the camera, used
And
to make
shoot
little
them.
videos. Yeah.
Hmm.
So
Cool.
I did that for a long time. I'd say in the last 5 years, I've really ramped back up doing it again. So from probably the age of about 25 till now, there's been a bit of a pause, but that led into this concert photography, which has really made it take off again for me.
Hmm. What do you like about it?
Uh, I like live music, and
Yeah,
well, I love music and I love taking photos. So it's sort of when they combined it, it just struck something in me, and now I can't stop.
it does get a bit addictive, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess
How about
uh,
yourself? How did it start for you?
uh, I started taking photographs a long, long time ago. My dad used to take photographs. He had a couple of nice cameras, and I think I started taking photos when I was about 6 or 7. And There's big gaps in that time, but in my teens, um, I had one of the teachers at high school was one of the maths teachers decided to set up a photo club, and I helped him set up the darkroom and stuff. And I'd never done any darkroom work before, and I got into it from there really, and then it became a real big thing. But one of the main influences for me, and I'm sorry to say this, on one level was watching the movie Blow Up by Antonioni, and the fantasy of the rich fashion photographer caught me, and that became my goal. But in between, and I ended up working actually in a fashion photography studio in Sydney as an assistant to um, photographer, and then all along the time with my mates, because again, like you, I wasn't much of a surfer, and I kept hurting myself on my skateboard, and so I took photographs of them. Very similar, really. I grew up in Manly in Sydney, and um, but we used to go to a lot of gigs. So we'd go. We saw Free and Deep Purple and all these
Oh,
bands way back
now
in
we're
the
talking.
day. Yeah, way back in the day. Early late 60s, early 70s, performing at Randwick Racecourse. Huge concerts they were, and they'd have 3 or 4 big name acts on um, for the day. It was just a huge thing. And so I didn't take many photos at that, but then I started getting into it and going to gigs by myself. And I guess the first one that I really got into was Jethro Tull. And that was probably about 1972, 73, I think. And
Very nice.
I went from there. It was interesting. I was looking at your that video you made recently, the
Yes.
vlog,
Yeah, yeah.
and I was intrigued. How you use Flash and things like that because I started using Flash uh, way back. because it was the only way you could really capture anything in film.
Yeah.
You just they just didn't have the latitude you've got with the digital cameras these days.
Hmm.
And so I used to blind band members all the time, and so I was intrigued that you're doing it that way, because I stopped using Flash for that kind of thing a long, long time ago. So tell me a bit about that and how you cope with that.
Yeah, so that's that venue. So that's a local venue on the Sunshine Coast. It's a real like small DUI sort of shows, punk hardcore shows, and that's the only place I can use a flash.
Right.
Um, I've got permission from the promoter and from the bands. I always ask them because
Hmm.
it's a big no-no in the industry now to use flash
So
because you do blind people, and it's
throw them
it's
off.
it's not nice for the crowd and stuff like that. But specifically for those shows, I can, and they just look so much better. Like
So what do you
the
what makes it better for you?
well, the
What's
first
the
yeah
key aspect of it?
yeah. So the first thing is there's really bad lighting in this
Hmm.
venue, which is the main reason. But I really like the way the pictures pop with the flash, so I get a really good highlighted front of the band member, even lighting, and it really blackens out behind, which I like because I
Hmm.
want all the focus drawn in. I add a big vignette to it as well to really circle it in on the picture, and just and I do ramp down the flash. So it's not a full flash; it's about one and a half down, and I use a diffuser as well, and
Yep.
it creates a really black background and a really
Right.
poppy
How long did it
that
take you
real
to refine that?
that just happened. That
Yeah.
just happened. I did one show there, and I've been from some bigger shows where I'm strictly not allowed to use Flash, and I applied that to the first show I went to this punk venue, and I hated the photos. They were really hard to edit. The lighting was horrible.
Yep.
Rampant ISO like through the roof. There were, a lot of noise in my pictures.
Yep.
And then the next time I went, I said, "Oh, can I use some Flash? Can I do this?" And in the meantime, looking, studying some of the more well known guys online, and it's all poppy flash. It's all like in your face flash. And I found some people that had that real dark, rich background, and I tried to emulate that, and that's where I am now, and that's all I want to do. If I could use
Right.
flash at every show, I would. I just like the way it looks.
Right. But yeah, it's really interesting because I mean I was shooting in film, and so my out for doing that was um, pushing the film to the extreme. So
Mm,
much as you were pushing the ISO of the digital camera, um, I pushed the film. So in those days, going back into the early 70s, right up into the early 80s, the fastest films you could get in black and white were like 400 ASA ISO
mm-hmm,
5X. Um, or if you were feeling really wealthy, you could get a few films. AGFA had one, I think, and someone else had one at 1600 ASA.
right.
And so, but even then, you really needed 3200 or 6400 to really be able to capture it, because even the lights in those days were nothing like a big contemporary light show,
Mm,
where there is a lot of light. Um, but it was more like your gigs, not quite as bad as your gigs. They'd have spots and stuff and a few
yeah,
pots
yeah.
underneath, but basically it was there wasn't a lot of light to play with, and so I'd have to push the film. I'd have to get in the dark room and process the film, trying to guess what um, what exposure I'd actually given the film. I had an idea in my head, but I'd have to push the film using special developers and stuff like that. And even then, usually I ended up with these incredibly thin negs.
Mm,
And luckily, because I was working in this photographic studio at the time, there was a really good printer there. The person who was the printer, Fritz, he was also a really interesting photographer. He went to Led Zeppelin at Sydney Showground and shot with a 5x4 camera,
Oh,
and which is real. That's dedication.
yeah.
He was right down the front shooting with a 4x5. That's dedication. But he was a really good printer, and so he used to get the max out of my negs for me, and they had really beautiful equipment in the lab as well. So that was good. But yeah, that was always a challenge. So there was that going on. Plus, color film really didn't go over about 160 ASA, and so I used to experiment with infrared film and all sorts of things just to
Did
see
you
what
always
came
use a
out of it.
flash? Did you always use a flash though?
No, it, there were a couple of times I used flash, but I just stopped. The time I stopped was actually I was shooting Rod Stewart, and I mean that's a really long story, but I actually got on the stage for the Rod
Oh, right.
Stewart gig. I'll tell you the story if you want. It goes for a while, but once I got up on the stage, I had a flash on, and after I took a couple of shots, one of the crew came over and said, you can't do that, no more flash." And so I just ripped the flash off and just kept shooting. It was just,
Yeah.
you just had to do it. But luckily, Rod and Ronnie Wood, who was in the band at the time, were wearing white. And so they bounced a lot of light. But in another way, that became a problem because it blew out all the highlights.
Yeah.
So yes, it was always a touch and go thing with what the outcome was going to be. So you'd take photographs and I'd be terrified until I processed the negs and looked at them and went, there's something there. And hopefully you could print from it. So it was a horrible experience, really. There was always this pressure and tension about whether you'd get something or not. And the same with what you're talking about, just
Oh,
different.
but my fear, like I can just say the band's tuning, warming up. I'll go fire off 10 photos and I can check what's
Yeah, yeah.
working, where I'm
And
at.
I'm working from
Yeah.
rolls of 36. So
Yeah.
while you shoot one camera, got to change films in between,
Yeah.
while
Yeah.
everything else is still going on and it's all mad. So, or and at times you'd be crushed up against the stage, and trying to change films in between your 36
Yeah.
shots.
Yeah. I think that's one
Fun.
of the, like, yeah, when we're talking about what draws you to it as well, I think that the excitement that brings, like, you can't. I mean, even if you do street photography or portrait photography, fashion, whatever, everything's somewhat curated. So, like,
Yeah.
there's some planning. Gig
There
photography
is
is,
some degree of control.
yeah,
Whereas
some
once you
control.
start doing this kind of stuff,
Nothing.
it's in the lap of the gods. You
Yeah,
just don't know where it's going to go. But yeah, that's part of the fun. And you come
yeah,
out with
exactly.
bruises, and I mean, I think you mentioned in that video you got kicked in the head the other night.
Kicked in the
Um,
head. Yeah, I forget who said it, and it was someone very famous, a street photographer, and they said if your photos aren't good enough, you weren't close enough. So I've been
right.
trying to apply that to a punk show, and
Yeah. That's a risky. Yeah.
yeah,
It was probably for me. It would have been the late 70s when I stopped taking photographs at gigs like that, because that's when it started getting really dangerous, physically dangerous.
right.
When the bands used to go nuts. Um,
And you're in the
so
crowd because
yeah,
you're not
well,
in,
there's
yeah,
nowhere
you're
else
in the,
to be.
yeah, yeah,
Unless you can fake it and get up on the stage somehow.
yeah.
You're in the crowd with everybody else, and they're all going nuts. So you just got to try and deal with it. And I've
Yeah,
seen that
lucky
from your
me.
stuff. Like it's fun stuff. Um, so from from the photos that you've taken, what's your favorite photograph, do you think, and why?
I had a good look at a lot of photos to try and find a favorite, and this is going to be a bad answer for you right now. I couldn't pick one, but a lot of the,
That's a
a
good
lot of
answer.
the, yeah, I can't pick a favorite. I've got a
Lucky you.
favorite. Yeah, I can see that I'm leaning in a certain style and direction.
Mhm.
If I was to pick one, it's going to be from a recent punk show as well, and it's a really tight photo of the lead singer from Hacker, Melbourne punk band, and she's screaming, and there's a lot of detail, and I kept it in color, and I think that's my favorite so far.
Yeah, that's a really cool, that's that fraction of a second when, you've got all the detail, you've got all the action. It's a great image. So yeah, no, so tell me a bit more about getting that photo, because I mean that epitomizes what we were talking about a minute ago, where, you really got tight, you got close up to the action there.
Yeah,
Um,
that was fighting through a mosh, and like at that point, she's at front of stage and leaning into the crowd. So yeah, that's me pushing through people, jamming my camera in there. I wanted to get it tight. I only want to do it once. I didn't want to jam my camera in someone's face. That's with a flash as well.
right.
So I thought I'm going to do this once, and yeah, that's the shot I got. I just like it because of how close. Because there's not going to be many like that. Like
Yeah.
especially when I go to these bigger bands and there's more rules, and I'm down in a pit and whatever. A zoom will get you that close, but it doesn't look the same. It doesn't have the
No.
same, the same angle. So that's why I love it because
Yeah.
it's going to be rare.
So what focal length do you normally work at? Are you got fixed or you
Nah, so my go-to is a zoom, but it's only a 12 to 35.
right? Okay.
But it's fixed at f2.8 through the whole zoom, which is a bonus.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, but I'm working in micro four thirds camera, so that'll be a 24 by 70. So that's pretty good range.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I normally sit around 50 is what I
Yeah.
like. Yeah.
Yeah.
How
Most
about
of
you?
most of my stuff was with a 50 prime lens. So I just it was just easier and lighter, and I mean because the analog cameras were a lot heavier as well,
Yeah.
than the digital. Um, they were better made. I mean, you could drop them and they didn't break. Um, they just dented someone or something
And
among
then work for
themselves.
another 30 years.
That's right. Well, I mean, I'm still using my Nikon FE film camera, and it still just goes boom, boom, boom every time.
Mm.
And they're beautiful things. Um, but yeah, I think I mean I work a lot in digital these days. But um, yeah, so that's a really nice one. So my comparison for that one would definitely be the Mark Bolan photograph that I got.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and and I think the other difference between shooting analog and digital, I mean, because you've got your monkey viewer on the back, um, do you do you sort of use that out front, or do you shoot through the viewfinder?
Most of the time through the viewfinder,
Mhm.
things like that, like, if a guitarist or a singer is getting into a certain position and I obviously can't get down to match it with the viewfinder, I'll move it here or pull it
Yeah,
out. Or
yeah,
if I'm in the crowd, holding the camera up to get more, but predominantly viewfinder. I just prefer the viewfinder.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
that with analog, of course, that's how you got to work. So it
yeah.
was always through that thing, and you're sort of there juggling all the time with the crowd.
Did you ever
And
have to just fire away?
um, I did. I
Blind.
usually didn't because the film was just so precious.
Yeah.
Really, it was more like waiting for the moment. Like that's. I guess that's the thing about the Mark Bolan photograph. I'd been watching him performing for a while, and I sort of had a mood or a feeling of how he was moving around the stage and stuff, and he would present himself in a particular way, and I sort of just got locked in position and just hoped that he'd move, so that I could get that shot. And it was like when I shot it, I knew I had it, and it was like the biggest buzz. It was such a wonderful feeling, and I've only ever had it a few times, particularly in gig type situations where because it's absolutely that fraction of a second that you're capturing, and to be looking forward to it, to be waiting for it, and then to catch it is such a great thing because it is a
Mhm.
fraction of a second. If you miss it, it's gone.
Yeah, and
And that look.
that one's bang on. Like if fraction later he'd be looking away and a different
Absolutely.
face. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, and just everything about it to me, for me that's definitely my favorite, and so it's sort of fun. But coming back to Flash, I mean, there are the in the photographs that will show. Um, a bit contentiously, I've got a couple of photographs of Gary Glitter, and
Right.
Gary has sort of a bad reputation these days.
Mm.
But I have to say that as a performer, he was remarkable. He put on one of the best shows I've ever seen. In fact, he did two shows in Sydney, and I went with my brother, who's a musician, and we used to go a lot of gigs together, and we went to see Gary Glitter on the first night, and then we bought tickets and took our mum on the second night, which was really fun. And she loved it. I mean, he was such a showman. Love or hate what he turned into or what he probably was at that time, but
Mm.
he was a real showman, and it was so much fun to photograph, when they're really out there, when they're really into it, when the muso's doing their job and you're doing your job, there's nothing really like it, is there?
No, well,
It's
that's
it's
right. And I think that's why I sort of I like heavier music, classic rock style music. And I think that's more fun to photograph. I've done a couple of, I was at a festival and it had, a pretty eclectic lineup. And there was like a few more folk bands. There was some DJs. Not as fun. There's not
no,
as much,
no,
there's not as much. I mean, you can only get so many photos of someone sitting in a chair
yeah,
playing
yeah.
acoustic guitar. But
You're absolutely right. I
yeah.
mean, that can be a beautiful thing, of course. But yeah, I mean, that's like people like Ian Anderson from Jethro Tull.
Mm.
Um, he was the first person I blinded, but he was such a pro that I was the only photographer there, and I was jammed up on the stage, and he just kept playing to me. So even though every time I fired my flash, and I wasn't using any diffusion, I probably had it on full because I was using slow film. Unlike you, you're very kind to the performer. And every time the flash went off, I could see his reaction. Immediately after, just this little. But he kept playing to me because he's a showman, and that sort of was a really fun part of it. The whole of his band um, were showmen. Really, they were all dressed up and really very cool. And I heard that they've just released a brand new album. Jethro Tull has
Oh,
just
what?
released another
Really?
album. Yeah, the
Yeah,
last couple of
okay.
days. So that's pretty exciting. I have to have a listen to that. But yeah, so those kinds of things. Any other of those photos that you sort of you know are buzzy for you?
I included one crowd photo, and I've been really drawn to that lately, turning
Yeah,
around, shooting the crowd, especially when the band's getting involved with the crowd. I don't
right.
know, I just like that. I guess there's the extra energy from the crowd. Um,
I think it's a
you,
really good path to go down as well. I mean, I didn't take a lot of crowd photos. I took a few. I've got one of Rod Stewart um, where he's he's sort of crooning away, and because I was on the stage, there were some fans hanging over the edge of the stage, just some girls just
yeah.
looking up at him lovingly, just sort of going, oh, wow, and so but I haven't got a lot of that. But I was actually watching a documentary yesterday about another Sydney photographer, um, and he's Brian Cook, his name was, and he did a lot of underground stuff, kind of like what you do. And there was a pub in Sydney called the Hopeton, which was famous, infamous, and in the 70s and 80s, what it would have been late 70s, early to late 80s. It was huge. It was like the place to go for any kind of underground stuff. But they did, folk and everything. Anyone was welcome. But there's this cool thing on YouTube. It's called Exposing Sydney's Underground Music, which you
I
might like
reckon
to
our
see.
algorithms are aligned, and we must
You've
watch the
seen it?
same things on YouTube. Because
Yeah,
about 2 days ago, I
that
watched a
popped up.
documentary on Brian Cook in Sydney.
There you go. And it's a really cool thing,
It was
and
good.
he's a really, he's a very eclectic sort of photographer.
Yeah.
But he did a lot of crowd stuff. Yeah. My brother even appears in one of his photographs. So
Oh, nice.
from his early bands, but my brother's down in Melbourne playing these days. But yeah, so that's fun. Isn't that funny though? The universe has funny ways of doing things.
Yeah.
That we both come across that. What else you got? You've got some other picks there,
So I was going to talk about how I still can't decide whether I prefer black and white or color.
right?
Um, I think it's more so, it's especially working with digitals and just say I'm blessed with heaps of stage lighting and it's crazy. It's a bit of a cheat code to just flick it to black and white, especially when the pictures are oversaturated. You can't get good natural skin tones. So that's sort of my pulse, which way to
You're
go at the
you're
moment.
having a conflict with your inner Ansel Adams, are you?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. But then if it's real heavy punk music, I'm like, it looks better in black and white, but sometimes the color's good. So I'm yet to determine
I,
that.
I work both ways. I mean, really, the photo you've got of the guy who's sort of got his arm up and he's sort of obscuring his face.
Yes.
The clarity of that shot, the crystal clear um, image is really nice. The tonal range is really nice in that. And I really like that. But at the same time, the other photo you've got there of the topless gentleman, um, um, uh, that's really cool too. That I mean, he almost looks like a Roman something or other.
Yeah, that's
But
true. Yeah, that had to stay in color. That one, just I mean, the tattoos looked better,
yeah,
especially like the. That's not a light in the top right. It was there was like a. They didn't have a
sub
smoke
machine or
machine.
something.
It was like just to create a constant haze on stage,
Yeah,
and I snuck. I was pretty. I'm not allowed on stage, but I was that far climbed over onto as much as I could to get an angle coming back this way.
yeah,
And yeah, the cut like I mean, just the it kept the really good skin tone. The tattoos pop out, so like
yeah.
that in black and white, it doesn't look half as good. So
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, whichever way it works,
yeah,
Uh, to me, the trick is getting the shot, and then you can work on it if you want to.
mm,
I don't have any. I mean, I don't sort of edit things of this kind anyway to change what's there, other than highlighting the important details, I guess. Because when I was working, well, in analog, you sort of when you're developing a print or exposing a print, you can dodge and you can sort of burn in and do things like that, which one does in Photoshop or whatever people use these days. Um, and I think it's fine whichever way you go. I don't care. I mean, I think
yeah,
whatever the artist says is the go.
yeah. Well, I could even provide say one of these, maybe even. I think it would be good to see the that black and white photo with the obscured face one we talked about. I'd say besides the last one, the favorite that I said, heavily
Hmm.
edited.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
And what sort of editing do you do?
So I use Lightroom, and the biggest problem I have is artificial light. the whole picture will be, if it's a red stage light and it's just a
Hmm.
full red image, it,
Right.
it doesn't look good. Like that, the first one of Amy Taylor,
Yeah.
that original is red, full
Right.
red.
Okay.
That venue loves red lights and it drives me crazy.
Yeah. I mean,
All
it's a
set.
great shot. It's such a great catch,
Yeah.
with her playing straight to you. I mean, you couldn't ask for more, straight down the barrel. That's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that naturally that picture is saturated red. So
Right.
I've done enough to correct that back. So and that's the best skin color I can get without it going a bit funny.
Yeah. Well, I think that's okay. I mean, it looks like she's under light, and it's in my opinion, it's great. It's a lovely catch. Um, the other one I want to throw in, just for random madness, I guess, is the photo I've got of Brian Ferry from Roxy Music, which
Is
looks
this the
like a
first one?
multi-exposure. It's
Yeah.
it looks like a multi-exposure where he's sort of going across, and that was really weird because I was using a camera I'd never used before, and it was at the time, which I guess it must have been 79, something like that. Um, it was one of the first electronic exposure cameras. And so I was working in the low light situation and I fired the thing and the camera was just doing this thing and I didn't even know what it was doing. It's sort of like it just did this long exposure. And I'm going, oh no, here I am with a camera and I had no idea what it was going to do. And that came out of it. And I thought, well, I can live with that.
It's
It's just,
cool. I like
yeah,
it. I thought it
yeah.
was two people. I thought it was
No,
two people.
it's just,
Yeah.
it was just him, but my movement and his movement
Mm.
created that sort of blurred effect. And the digital exposure, it was trying to get the right um, exposure for the shot. And so it stayed open much longer, but there was enough light coming off the spots on Brian to create this multi-exposure thing. But
Yeah,
it's
it's a
one
cool shot.
exposure. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's lucky, purely lucky. Um,
No, you meant that. You set up your rig to
yeah, yeah, yeah.
delay the yeah.
I'll edit that out. But yeah, it's yeah that's and I love those sorts of really happy coincidences or happy accidents, if you like, because you'll
Yeah.
learn a lot from them
Yeah,
and
that's
that sort of
right.
thing. Any photographer um, who doesn't make mistakes, and get something like that because it gives you ideas, it gives you possibilities for doing other things as
Yeah.
well,
Can
which I
we
think is
talk
really
about that?
important.
Can we talk about that? The second photo of yours there. I don't know who it is. He's got his black and white. Both his.
Oh, yeah, sure. That's Doc Neeson from the Angels, the one where he's sort
Right.
of
Yeah,
okay.
it's going like
So
this. Yeah,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
cool.
So yeah, that was good. Poor old Doc's not around with us anymore. Most of these guys, half of them are dead. Um, I did an exhibition several years ago called Dead and Alive, and since then several more of them have died, sadly. But yeah, Doc, that was I really like that photograph myself. It was taken at the Manly Flicks, which was a cinema that got turned into a venue, and it had a second story. So I was up in the upper story of it, the what do you call it? I can't remember what they call it anymore. Wherever, not the stalls, whatever it was. The yeah, can't remember. But anyway, so I'm
Balcony?
sort of standing at the edge. Sorry.
Is it the balcony? Is it like, is
That's
that
the
what, is
word.
that,
Thank you. That's
yeah.
exactly what the balcony. Thanks. I'm getting old. I forget these things. These words you don't use anymore. And so I was standing right on the edge, and the balcony's only sort of up to my knees, leaning over, with a 50 mm lens to get the shot. But luckily, he stretched his arms out enough to. But yeah, and as you can see, the pot underneath him is lighting from underneath, so it's kind of
Yeah. I just
interesting.
like how blacked out it is. It
Yeah,
really just sucks you right into the center. And it's
yeah,
sort of like that is exactly what I'm trying to do now. That
right.
method there. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, if you look at most of my shots, the backgrounds are pretty black, but
Hmm.
um, it's yeah. I think refining exposures and things like that. I mean, obviously, when you're using a flash, you capture the action. It stops most of the action usually, so you get that nice crispness about it. Whereas like with I've got quite a few shots where there's quite a lot of blur in it, because I was shooting at a 30th of a second or whatever,
Oh, right.
um, handheld, and so you're just praying that they're not move the artist isn't moving too fast, and
Yeah.
and you're not being bumped around too much by the crowd.
That's giving me
But
nightmares. That just sounds all too difficult to me.
uh,
And then
maybe
you
I was
don't
a
even
bit.
know if you got, yeah, you don't
Then you
even
don't
know if you
even know
got
if
the
you got the
shot.
shot. I mean, because basically what you had to, I mean, well, what I did was I would stagger the aperture. So I'd be either changing, I'd probably be shooting wide open at 2.8 with my 50. And I would be changing the shutter speed depending on what
Hmm.
I thought was the amount of light on there. And, I'd go down to a 15th or an eighth even of a second, handheld, to try and make sure I got at least one shot. So I'd be
Yeah.
staggering throughout the concert, as it changed, um, trying to use different speeds and stuff like that.
Right.
That was normal procedure.
How many rolls did you take?
Well, as many as I could afford. Usually, I
Yeah.
mean, I wasn't getting paid for it. I never made any money out of these. I
Yeah.
sold a few when I had an exhibition, but I'd probably usually go with three or four rolls.
Yeah.
36 exposure, and
Hmm.
you know that would usually get me through. Um, I reckon probably often I would only go with two rolls.
Yeah. How much was film back then?
A lot
Cheaper than
cheaper
it
than it
is
is
to...
now.
Yeah.
Lot cheaper than it is now. Yeah. Well, I mean, I bought some developer and fixer the other day, and it cost me $100.
Oh, yeah.
Without any trouble, and that's it used to be $5 or $6. In my day, it was nothing. And film, a roll of film was like $1.50 or $2 or something.
Yeah.
Even the good film, you might pay $5 for an Ektachrome 160 or something like that. But I don't
Yeah.
know. Have you ever shot analog? Have you shot film?
Heaps. Heaps
Oh
and
yeah.
heaps. Yeah,
Well, you know
yeah.
what I'm talking about then.
Yeah, yeah. I went through a big film stage there. I
Yeah.
still do now. Most of my family stuff at home, I'll shoot film.
Oh, good,
If we go away on holidays, I'll take a couple of rolls.
good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you process it?
Yeah, do it myself,
Yeah.
develop and
Oh,
yeah.
good, good, good. Yeah.
Scan. I can't afford to pay a lab, so
Yeah. Yeah. No, well, it's great. I mean, I used to do a lot of transparency stuff too.
oh
Um,
yeah.
Most of my color stuff was transparency. I hated color prints, for the kind of stuff I was doing. Transparency
Hmm.
was really the only way you could get the color saturation and detail. Um, Print film back then was terrible stuff. It was like 50 cents a roll, and you got what you paid for.
Yeah,
Um,
right.
But yeah, no, all my old color stuff here that's all trannies. Um,
Hmm.
so, but it's good quality stuff. Ektachromes, not so much Kodachrome, but Ektachrome mostly. I used to love, if I could get it, Agfa black and white film is stunning film. There was a film called Agfa Scalar, Scala, and it was the best black and white film ever. And you could actually turn it into uh, there was a positive reversal process that it went through. So you could either use it as negs or you could have it processed and turned into positive transparencies.
Oh, really?
Black and white film. Yeah, it was really interesting. I've actually got a few rolls still, but there's no labs, as far as I know, anywhere on the planet anymore that process it. So you can do it with ordinary developer, something like Rodinal or something like that, but
Mm.
and you just get negs. But even then, it's still beautiful. I've got all this out of date film.
Sitting in the
Well,
fridge, just wait.
yeah, sometimes it's in the fridge. But it's amazing how good film really is at surviving, as long as you don't stick it in a car, on a hot day.
Yeah.
Film's pretty amazing, and don't put it through an X-ray at the airport.
Oh,
They're the
yeah.
two worst things you can do.
Yeah.
But
I
even
still
even at room temperature, it's pretty good.
yeah, I still sneak. I've got a little Canon point and shoot that I love. I've been taking that to shows with me,
All
just to
right,
fire off a couple here and there,
cool.
and only one or two a show. So obviously I've got to get through 36, but I'm interested to see what they come back like,
Yeah, yeah. Oh,
just
it's
for the
good.
hell
Well, I
of
mean,
it.
have you got any override on exposures and things?
No,
It's
but
just purely automatic.
yeah, this one's just full auto, just just because it's so small and so easy, and I only get three songs, so I don't really have time to be mucking around. So I'll just quickly
Okay.
get
Oh,
that
that's
out.
right. Oh, yeah, three songs.
Three
Yeah, because they
songs.
don't want anyone sweating.
Nah, yeah, no one's sweating.
That's
I
right.
actually, I actually asked the promoter about it, and they said the main thing is people are paying it because if I'm in the up the front, I'm jumping around everywhere. I'm in the
Yeah,
way.
yeah,
And it's a courtesy thing to people paying for tickets. They don't want to be
yeah,
looking at a photographer's head,
yeah,
you know?
yeah. No, I get that, but I remember years ago I did get a couple of passes in the olden days, once they started coming in, and the story I was told was, well, we don't want them sweating. We don't want any photographs of the performer sweating. And that's really funny, I mean, because the good guys, the good girls, they're so into it that they're going to be sweating. They're working hard.
Yeah, yeah, exactly
They're
right.
giving everything.
Yeah, I don't believe
Um,
that.
yeah, that's what I was told. Um, which sort of reminds me, um, I guess, about getting passes and stuff like that. What's it like, where you are to get a stage pass or a VIP pass to take pics?
Yeah, so it's been a slow grind. So when I first started out, it was free shows, DIYs, backyards where I just asked and they said, yeah, come along.
Yeah,
Um, just to build up a portfolio, just to have concert photography to show.
sure.
And that, yeah, and then I went down a path where I was just asking, sending hundreds of emails, just potluck, and no success with
Hmm.
that at all. And, through research, talking to other people, it became pretty clear that if I was to get a pass, you need to be providing a service to the artist, and that comes through a publication. So you got to align with the publication,
Right.
music blog, media outlet, people even who just do social media to push stuff, or the venue. So I've teamed up with a local Sunshine Coast music blog here, and I get passes through them. So I do their photos and/or reviews, a little bit of both. Um, they have a bit of access to Brisbane, which I'm slowly getting into as well. It's a bit harder,
Yeah.
but even at a show last night, I did Pennywise last night on the
Oh,
Sunshine
yeah.
Coast, which was really good. And I met a lady there, and she's like, "Oh, I do reviews for this media outlet. We're looking for more photographers." So I've linked up with her. So
Good. Good.
you got to have it's pretty much publication or bust. If you can't provide any
They're not
exposure,
going to let you in. Yeah.
they're not going to let you in. Yeah,
Uh, yeah.
makes sense.
Oh, yeah. From a business point of view, not
Yeah,
from an artistic point of view.
no.
Shall we say? Yeah. But yeah, it's interesting stuff. Um, so
So
anything
you so
else that?
you
Go on.
I was just going to ask, so you were just buying a ticket to go to
Yep.
the show,
Yep.
and no one checked your bag.
No, there was no bag checks in those days. It was, well, I'll tell you the story about the Rod Stewart one, because to me that was my classic gig. Um, I'd gone along to, it was at Randwick Racecourse, which, if you know Sydney, it used to be a big venue for things. The Stones played at Randwick, and everyone played at Randwick back in the 70s and 80s. And anyway, so this I went along and I was hanging around down the front while they were changing between um, the um, the earlier band and Rod Stewart's thing, the Faces, and there was a guy wandering around and he wasn't moving stuff. He sort of seemed to know, he was telling people what to do. And I said, "Oh," I stopped him as he was walking past the stage, on the stage. I said, "Any chance I can take photos? Get up on stage and take photos?" And he said, "Oh, I can't give you permission to do that, but if you walk over into the middle of the field, go and see Paul, and he's the promoter, and if he says it's okay, cool." So I go wandering off into the darkness. I mean, it was nighttime, and wandering off into the darkness, and eventually I found this guy walking around the middle of this huge race course, sort of just trotting around. And I walk up to him and say, "Are you Paul?" And he goes, "Yeah, yeah." And I said, I was talking to one of the guys on stage, and I asked him if I could take a photo. And he said, "If you said it was okay, um, I could get up on the stage." And he said, "If you can get up on the stage, you can take photos." And so I thought, cool. So I ran back to the stage, and luckily the stage manager was still there. And I said, "Paul said it's okay." And he grabbed out his arm and just pulled me up onto the stage. And so I spent the whole gig up on the stage, which was amazing. And that was just a fantastic thing. And it turned out that it was Paul Dainty, who is a huge promoter. He's made films. He's done all sorts of stuff. He's promoted just about every big band in the world. He still works. I think he works out of Melbourne. And yeah, so it was just, oh, if Paul says it's okay, and I jumped on it. But you just got to. I mean, I was 18 or something.
Yeah.
I didn't know that you don't do that. Um,
Well, thank God you did.
yeah, yeah. Oh, absolutely. And but I mean, I had the nous to do that, but I didn't have the nous to do anything with the photos that I took, and I took some good photos, but I never marketed them or did anything like that. I was just keen on taking the photos. I was a
Yeah.
fan,
Yeah.
a fan who takes photos. So it's sort of it's funny from that point of view, and I really encourage you to do what you're doing because you're good at what you do, and push it, push it, and you'll do well.
Oh, yeah, that actually leans into. I was thinking then when you were saying that about asking someone, I've always been someone who's a bit like, oh, I don't want to bother this person and I
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
want to do that. Since I've started this, and because I'm so passionate about it and I just want to do more,
yeah,
that's gone out the window and it's brought this new ability now where I will email the promoter. I'll find out who's carrying the bags, the people who are the roadies.
yep,
Get this guy's number. I'll try to find this email. I've
good.
like my sleuth abilities now, trying to find email addresses and phone numbers, and I just hit everyone.
Yeah.
Find the band members, find relatives, find find anyone.
Fantastic. And
Yeah,
that's what you got to do. You got to ask the question, because they can
yeah,
only say no,
that's right.
you know. That's all they can
Yeah,
do. And if you're ballsy enough to do it, then good on you, run with it. That's great.
yeah. So I've only been doing this for about 6 months,
Hmm.
and I mean, 6 months ago I was, in people's backyards trying to get a picture for a portfolio, and now, to meeting people at festivals asking, can you come do some stuff for our publication? I can't believe how quick
Yeah.
it's taken off, and that sort of leaned into like the Substack newsletter that I was doing. I was like, oh, I want to do this because if you read now and watch some videos now, it's very much early days, and you can see a progression. And I thought that'd be interesting because you had, get a glimpse of what it takes, and hopefully people see it and want to try to do the same thing, or it's interesting. So
Yeah, yeah. I think it's great, and I encourage you to keep doing it. Go for it, because it is a fun thing to do.
yeah,
There's not many gigs you can do that are as much fun, really.
that's
Um,
right.
you
What are
know,
you getting back? You getting back in there, or what, William?
I won't. I'm much more abstract these days. I make a lot of videos and stuff, and I sort of play around. I'm a lot quieter these days in my listening habits, shall we say.
Okay.
Um, um, I had my fair share of coming away from a gig and my ears ringing for the next 24 hours or more in the olden days. So I like my hearing, and I've still got good hearing. But yeah, no, I mean, if I got the chance, I would. I did a baby animal shoot. Well, it's a long time ago now, but probably 15, 20 years ago, I got classes and stuff. But yeah, it these days I like to go to the gig and just enjoy it. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
if I'm lucky enough to get a ticket to see Queens of the Stone Age, if I can get into a Quatsa concert and just enjoy it, then that's what I'll do, because I mean
yeah.
they're an amazing band to watch.
I
For
mean,
example, that's
that's a good point because I'm going to see some bands that I really like, and I find that I leave the show and I'll be like, "Oh, that was good, I think."
I have no idea what music they played, what tracks they were. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's how I
yeah,
used to come away. I never knew what they played.
yeah,
That was one of the good things about going with my brother. He used to remember every song that they sang and the order that they sang it. He's got a
yeah,
great memory, but I had no idea. I was just too busy working. So
yeah,
I didn't really hear the gigs in general.
yeah. Well, that's like last night. I seen the before that I knew they were about to come on. I seen the roadie go up and put the set list down
Yeah,
at the mic stand,
yeah,
tape it to the floor. So because I was sitting there waiting because I was in the barrier section. So I ran up and stuck my camera over the feedback and got a picture of the set list.
good,
I'm like,
good, good.
I'm not, yeah, because I got to write about this one, so
Right,
now I know what they
that's the
played.
way to do it. Yeah. Well, I don't know if they still do it, but I remember going to gigs where after the gig they'd throw out the set list to
Yeah,
the audience. Yeah,
still
yeah,
doing that.
yeah. Good, good. But yeah,
Fangirls crying out for guitar
yeah,
picks and set
yeah.
lists.
The girl. I mean, the Mark Bolan T-Rex gig, girls were throwing their knickers on the stage. It's the only time I've ever seen it, but it actually did happen. You're just going, whoa. Um, the good old days.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, fun. Well, look, Mark, it's been great. I think we might wrap it up here, and hopefully we can have another chat at some point down the line. And it's been really interesting, and I encourage you to really push it and do it.
Thanks, mate. Appreciate it. It's been a good chat, and yeah,
Yeah,
definitely we'll get a. I'll see if I can get a few more images, and we'll have a chat again soon.
yeah. I've got plenty more I can throw out. So
Get into the archives.
yeah, indeed, indeed. All right. So thanks for listening, everyone out there. And I'll put all the details for both of our Substacks and probably YouTubes if we've got them, and all that sort of stuff in the notes so that you can check us out if you want to. Thanks for watching. I hope you found it interesting, and we'll see you next time.